George Eliot was the pen name of Mary Ann Evans, an English Victorian novelist, poet and translator. She has been credited with developing the method of psychological analysis that characterises much modern fiction. In 1859, she published her first full-length novel, Adam Bede, wherein she sets out her commitment to realism as a literary genre. In an essay on the artist and critic John Ruskin, Eliot herself defined realism as the doctrine that all truth and beauty are to be attained by a humble and faithful study of nature. By this, she did not mean that art can transparently represent the world, but rather that it should not falsify or romanticize it. Indeed, she believed that realism imposed itself on the artist as a moral and aesthetic imperative. Realist art represents and dramatizes the value of the ordinary. Art, she wrote, is the nearest thing to life. It is a mode of amplifying experience and extending our contact with our fellow man beyond the bounds of our personal lot. All the more sacred is the task of the artist when he undertakes to paint the life of the people. Adam Bede frequently points towards its own methods of representation and mocks the romanticist impulse to soften the hard edges of human life. With satirical contempt, she dismisses the injunction that if the world is not just what we like, then do touch it up with the tasteful pencil and make believe it is not quite such a mixed, entangled affair. She went on to write several other novels, including The Mill on the Floss, Silas Marner, Middlemarch and Daniel Deronda. In all her novels, her characters' triumphs take the form of renunciations or submissions in the face of conflicts between individual desires and moral responsibility. There is also a determinist vein to her novels, underpinned by the belief that every individual can only be understood in relation to their social relationships. In Middlemarch, the narrator interjects, "But anyone watching keenly the stealthy convergence of human lots sees a slow preparation of effects from one life on another." Now let's look at the poem. In George Eliot's In a London Drawing Room, setting serves to provide a snapshot of life in 1860s London. Although written in iambic pentameter, the poem feels like a spontaneous bricolage of impressions featuring frequent enjambments in free verse. There is a sense of acute anonymity, both of the speaker and of the scene, and people which she beholds. Nothing is sharply particularised or described, but is grouped in with a collective. At the time of writing in 1869, industrialisation had reached its zenith, bringing a high level of mechanisation, manufacturing output and industrial employment, and attracting the majority of the population into urban centres. From approximately 1.4 million people in 1815, the population of Greater London grew to well over 3 million by 1860. This new metropolis brought diverse classes, cultures, vocations and linguistic groups into close proximity, hollowing out traditional social bonds and eroding the natural rhythms of production. It is against this climate of modernity that Eliot wrote In a London Drawing Room, with Charles Baudelaire, the French symbolist poet, defining modernity as the transitory, the fugitive, the contingent, that half of art of which the other is the eternal and immutable. The fugitive and transitory, as we will see, features heavily in a London Drawing Room. The poem has been considered unique among Eliot's works insofar as it turns upon the nature of the world perceived and not upon the way in which the speaking consciousness perceives it. In other words, the poem is preconceptual. The images stand alone rather than serving to illustrate a thought. The transitory, ephemeral nature of contemporary life features heavily in the poem. For example, consider those lines, "No figure lingering pauses to feed the hunger of the eye, and all hurry on and look upon the ground, or glance unmarking at the passers-by. The wheels are hurrying too, cabs, carriages." Another theme is the monotony and uniformity imposed by urbanisation. The poem speaks of the people, vehicles and houses of London as being closed in multiplied identity. Everyone is assimilated into one single entity by their living conditions and the frenetic pace of daily life. The poem mirrors its monotony in its own form and content, with a conversational rhythm and a dearth of lyrical or figurative language. Another theme is the suppression of the natural world. Elements of the natural world are blotted out by the thick smog and shadow of 1860s London. That sky, that universal symbol of freedom and infinity, is cloudy, yellowed by smoke. While birds cannot make shadows as they fly, and the golden rays of the sun are clothed in hemp. At the heart of the poem is Eliot's use of simile and metaphor. Every comparison she draws reflects unfavourably on London's living conditions. The most striking appears in the final lines, where she describes the city as one huge prison house and court, where men are punished at the slightest cost. It's an image that captures the crushing weight of the city, a place not of freedom, but of surveillance and suffering. Eliot's attention to mundane detail also defines the poem's tone. In her novel Adam Bede, she famously turns her gaze, quote, without shrinking from cloud-born angels and prophets, sibyls and heroic warriors, to an old woman bending over her flower pot or eating her solitary dinner. This same attention to the ordinary runs throughout In a London Drawing Room. Eliot doesn't romanticise, she magnifies the everyday, forcing us to look at it without illusion. The poem is packed with small, monotonous details that build into a suffocating whole. This sense of suffocation is echoed in the poem's lexicon of enclosure and entrapment. Phrases like one long line of wall, solid fog, thickest canvas, all closed, and again one huge prison house, they all speak to a theme of confinement. There is no openness here, no escape. Formally, Eliot uses enjambments, lines that run on without pause to reinforce this theme. The absence of rhythmic momentum dulls the verse, making it feel almost prosaic. Consider this line. For view, there are the houses opposite, cutting the sky with one long line of wall like solid fog. The lack of punctuation draws us forward, but sluggishly. The imagery is dense, the rhythm flattened, echoing the monotony of surface and of form that Eliot names in the poem itself. Unfittingly, the poem is written in a single stanza of blank verse, uninterrupted and unvaried visually and rhythmically, mirroring the sameness and uniformity of the city it describes.